Stars Advise Us for the Couples of the Third Millennium by Ciro Discepolo, from the book Evaluate Your Synastry by Ciro Discepolo and Danila, Madau, Perra. Before going deeper into what I have explained in the previous chapters, and then giving, starting from my knowledge, some astrological advices to the couples of the new millennium, I would like to see this argument from a multidisciplinary perspective that will allow us an approach the most correct as possible to the argument astrology and love. Today we often assist to a kind of intellectual impotence from many people that, avoiding the risk to be indicated like a know-it-all person, prefer not to speak out of the very strict territories that the specializations and the super specializations of these years are producing in the world of the general culture. We astrologers, by nature and conviction so close to a holistic vision of life and of the world, can subtract ourselves to respect these forms of intellectual palisades and trying to have a Weltanschauung conception of the world, the most complete on this as on other arguments. For example, it is interesting to start an analysis of this kind, considering the point of view of a scientist that studies zoology. I am speaking about Desmond Morris, English author of very great successful books, that has studied the behavior of the animal man without permitting sociology and psychology to interfere too much with his opinions. I underline it not to denigrate these two human sciences, but to affirm, as I was saying before, the necessity of a real and a great cultural independence for every researcher. We cannot, at this purpose, avoid observing that today everyone tends to explain everything from psychology, which was once very thought like astrology, and today has become instead almost the depository of every knowledge and of every wisdom in the collective imaginary of the Western world. Then Desmond Morris, I was saying, he in the maximum freedom of thinking has considered man nothing more than a great nude monkey. It is even the title of his most successful book, a primate that evolved himself respect the mammal from which he descends directly, but from which he has not lost all the genetic traces that determinate his behavior. In other terms, the British scientist began to observe monkeys for a long time, and later he did the same thing with men, and he obtained specific deductions that now I will resume for you, because those are useful for the speech that we desire to develop. Morris studied, in particular, the sexual behavior of the animal couples and divided the same in 3 stages: formation of the couple, activities before the copula, and copula. Trying to trace a parallel between the hairy monkey and the not hairy monkey, i.e. man, Morris has asked himself why the animal couple can exist even in some short seasons of life, and the human one instead tends to establish an exclusive and durable link that in many cases goes through the entire experience of the existence of 2 persons. The conclusion, even if it can seem not very similar, is quite simple. Young animals emancipate themselves quite quickly from their parents, and early, sometimes very early, they abandon them to develop a completely independent destiny. With men, the things are really different because their children, to face life alone, need the strong help of their parents for very long periods, sometimes even too long. In these last years in particular, we are assisting more and more the phenomena of our children that don't decide to leave their parents' house until they are 30 to 35 years old. For this motive, according to Desmond Morris, man had to adapt his behavior to a similar need and had to address himself towards an exclusive and durable couple relation, as marriage and living together to save then children's security. In this direction, the English researcher explains even men's sexual behavior that is not limited to a precise season of the year, but that becomes the inspirer, more unconscious than conscious, of the lymph that will have to alimент the couple relation and to carry it forward during the years. It is a particular but interesting point of view to keep in evidence in the analysis that we want to conduct. Passing to psychology, we have to note that its founding father, Sigmund Freud, under this aspect, doesn't move too far away from the above-mentioned author and sees in sexual or psychosexual drive the spring that more determines human behavior, with a particular evidence in the couple. Carl Gustav Jung, as you know, had a very different thought because he recalled himself two archetypal meanings that are a part of the collective unconscious, where microcosm echoes the macrocosm morphology and the chemism of human sentiments can be compared to the dialectic of planetary movements. And the great Zurich psychologist left us, in this sense, a brief but memorable work. The couples study described in the book on synchronicity. As you probably remember, Jung searched the statistic significance of some astrological configurations that traditional astrology assigns to couples. In this research, he could in particular establish the great importance of the archetype recalled from the conjunction Sun-Moon, the one that ancient alchemists named the conjunctio oppositorum, and he verified that it is one of the most beautiful astrological aspects that there can be in a synastry. We are referring to that condition for which the man's sun is joined to the woman's moon. It constitutes an important information that everyone should know and of which all should keep in evidence in the channel of that necessary knowledge for a couple in the planning character of life together, from the blood group to food intolerances to preferences for the sea or the mountain. Only to recall a few simple examples, Jungian is also another very important researcher that made researches on couples. I am speaking about Verena Kast, psychotherapist that teaches in the Zurich University and at the Carl Gustav Jung Institute of the same city. Kast asks herself, what is the strength and what is the fragility of couples? According to her thought, every couple is founded on a specific fantasy that in turn recalls a myth, an archetype, and that represents an ideal charge, particularly alive during the falling in love, that prolongs itself when the couple is consolidated. In the instant of the falling in love, the lover changes to the lover's eyes, and the lover idealizes the sides of his own personality that the loved one shows to like. This would be the couple's strength, but at the same time even its fragility in the instant, in which the fantastic contents could decrease to the eyes of one of the two. The Swiss scholar advises then to be able to manage in these relation fantasies, to know better the myths that are at the bottom of couples, apparently very different between them, but that instead model themselves very frequently according to simple and repeatable schemes. Hera and Zeus, Shiva and Shakti, Merlin and Vivian, Sulamite and Salomon can be translated in the couples with relations of the type mother-son, old man, young woman, spouse, brother, spouse, sister, or in relations of a great fusion or a big reciprocal aggressiveness. I invite anyone who's interested to read the book The Couple, Red Publisher, for a deepened examination of these myths, but en passant we can note, for example, that the Shakti and Shiva myth could be adapted to the couples in which one of the two had the sun in the seventh house, and was then directed to strongly idealize the relationship to the point of believing that love, the love relation, and the world's creation are seen as a whole. In different words, we are in front of the significative image of a banknote that, divided in half, doesn't have any value. In the Pygmalion myth that sculpts a woman in ivory that corresponds to his desires, we can see many men with strong fire values and women in a dependence condition. For example, teacher, student, psychotherapist, patient, boss, secretary, and so on. Women often, in these cases, have values such as the sun in the 7th house or strong presences in Capricorn. Remember the film episode in Plaza Hotel in which Walter Madau is able to seduce one of his ex-girlfriends, dazzled by the Hollywood myth, listing to her a series of VIP names with which he was intimate. In the Ishtar and Tammuz myth, the love goddess and her young lover, we could have a her with Venus joined to Mercury, for example, and a him with the moon, or Venus joined to Saturn. In the Hera and Zeus couple myth, instead, based on rivalry as a relation model, we can identify all those couples with the sun in reciprocal square or in opposition, an important factor in my opinion on which I will return soon. Referring to Merlin and Viviane, or to the old wise man and to the young woman, we ideally rapport to those situations in which he has Venus or the moon joined to Mercury, and she, the moon, Venus, or the sun joined to Saturn. Sulamite and Solomon remind us at last, the couple spouse-sister and spouse-brother, or the relation fantasy of solidarity and of parity. Here, astrologically speaking, we find couples with strong Mercury, Aquarius, and 11th house values. I remember many of these that, sharing their life, don't share the bed, even being inseparable and feared both, respect the idea of a possible separation. Verena Kast concludes her interesting book, reminding us the very great merit of Jung, that consists in having underlined repeatedly that in every man exists a female component, anima, and in every woman a male component, animus. Biology demonstrates that in the human organism exist, in different proportions, either male or female hormones. Jung has always sustained this principle, and he even underlined that it is a matter of totality, that every person has to live the male and female component in base to his own proportions. In this way, he offered to many people the possibility to accept themselves the way they are, without obligating themselves to stick to a strict roles conception. More sociological is the approach of the sexologist and psychotherapist Maria Rita Parsi, that in her book The Harmful Love hypothesizes that a trauma suffered during childhood will condition our adult choices, pushing us to pass from a wrong love story to another, in the desperate research of a cure that has nothing to do with love. The Ingmar Bergman movie, The Strawberry's Place, could illustrate adequately Parsi's thesis, not in the sense that the protagonist, an old medicine professor, had many lovers in his life, but in the sense that he closed himself in a selfishness without hope, exactly following a sentimental wound of his youth. The author continues with possible therapies for sick couples, but here we could exit from the track of our study and then leave this track and go to confront ourselves with the thought of other scholars on the argument love and couples. The question that moves Willy Pasini's research, a very famous psychologist, is, what is the couple for? This is even the title of one of his successful books published by Mondadori that offers us a journey on the couple's planet exactly in the direction of the third millennium. The first answer that the author gives to his question is, the couple is useful to prolong love. And he adds, besides, to the very mistreated and vituperated life for two, the world has not yet found a valid alternative. The Swiss scholar offers us some quite uncomfortable data to start, which force us to reflect very much. In America, every 2 marriages a divorce will be celebrated. Second, a nativity rate of -0 demonstrates that living together doesn't mean any more to procreate. The center of interest is, then, progressively moved from children to the couple, the needs of which will tend to separate themselves from the ones of the family. Today, making children is a secondary choice. Respect our desires and respect our sustenance capacities, and on the couple's life will pour on the expectative that once weighed on children. As you are seeing, it is enormously in conflict with Desmond Morris's thesis, according to which the couple is such as to permit raising children. If children tend to disappear, with a nativity rate near 0, then we must approve of Pacini when he says that having babies is not the target of the union between a man and a woman. But if it is not this, which one is it? It can surprise people, continues the psychology professor and scientific divulgator, but according to Claude Lévi-Strauss and Sigmund Freud's studies, the universal law that is at the base of the couple formation is the incest's taboo. Recently, 3 French ethnologists, François Zonnebent, Elisabeth Copé-Rougier, and Marion Seltz, have received an important international prize for one of their researches on the habits of 10,000 societies. According to these 3 researchers, the forming of new couples is to attribute prevalently to 3 fundamental models. The prescriptive one, the partner will be imposed and he is a member of relative group. The semi-complex one, for example, the prohibition of a marriage between some consanguineous. The complex one, the system that is in use in a great part of Asia and the West, apparently total. The freedom of choice is, in reality, limited by a subtle system of rules that by the fact prohibit to subtract ourselves to our professional ambient, to our residence area, to our culture. In the most part of the cases, women are to adapt themselves to it. Then from these studies it should seem to emerge the concept of predictability in the union. It is also the thesis of the French sociologist Jean-Claude Kaufmann and of a couple of other French scholars, Michel Bozon and François Héron, that studying 3,000 couples have come even to give us some mathematical rules of the type that in the 50% of the cases, the members of a couple were born in the same region. The young girls that get married at the age of 18 chose an older partner in the measure of 4.5 years. The difference of the age decreases at 10 months. If the young girl gets married at the age of 25, women chose on average men 10 centimeters taller than them. Men look for overall aesthetical qualities in their lover, and women prefer the social position of the partner. We could continue this list, but we advise the interested persons to read specialized books. Interesting also the point of view of the Swiss sociologist Jean Kellerholz, that synthesizes in 3 points the characteristics of the new century's couple. 1. The matrimonial project is moved from economical finalities, the family support, to affective finalities, reciprocal support. 2. Today the couple also means separation, transition stages, and experimental families. 3. The point of reference of life as two today will not be searched in the other, but among our own sex members, and it is inside of this category that we search for comprehension. Let's go back to Willie Pacini, and let's list some finalities that, according to him, intercept today's dyadic relation. It could appear paradoxical, but according to Pacini, many couples that are being born during these years decide to do this avoiding the AIDS' danger, entrenching themselves or trying to entrench themselves inside a secure monogamist relationship. Another reason is the one of a good settlement search, a kind of insurance policy for the future. Also, Francesco Alberoni is on this wave's length, and he sustains to be, on the medium Italian side, a vocation to the welfare instead of the individualism. All of this will not surprise the ones that read Ernst Bernhard, who affirm that Italy lives under the Great Mother's mythologium, for which our people in Italy desire very much a public office and security, first of all. Among the targets of marriage we even find, always in according to Pacini, the Cinderella fairy tale or the dream of many young girls to obtain a social boost, like the very beautiful leading actress of Pretty Woman. The epilogue of this book is titled Which Future for the Couple? And it offers us, first of all, some statistics. In Italy, one marriage every 3 will fail, and only in Milan, every year there will be 4,500 separations and 2,800 divorces. To the numbers follow the detailed analyses that the Swiss scholar proposes to his readers, and from which we keep the distance to address ourselves definitively towards the astrological argument. In my opinion, answering quickly to the question that forms the object of this chapter, astrology can come to help the third millennium couple overall. At the knowledge level, I think that knowledge was the highest form of emancipation for humanity, and so as to know that for specific African countries we can visit them only after an anti-malarial therapy, so we would know which are the precise descriptions that a couple should have to last in time. I have sustained for at least 30 years the argument on the aimed solar returns, as many people know, and on the active astrology that permits us to install some lightning conductors on the roof of our marriage hut to defend us from the arrows of the bad stars. But it is not the argument that I wanted to illustrate to you, but I desired to tell you about the results of the statistic research applied to the rules that should guide us better for the choice of a partner. On this argument, everything and its contrary was said, and we watch, as in no other fields, a total anarchy by astrologers that, sometimes only on the wrong track of one of their own conviction, never legitimated from any serious research, invent some couples' alchemies, as much original as inexistent. Personally, I faced this problem many years ago when I realized that the results of my daily practice were in conflict with the others of the astrological tradition. In the first edition of my Guide to Astrology in 1979, I wrote that it would be necessary to teach children in the elementary school to avoid the relationships with subjects that have the sun in the reciprocal square. But the practice that I had under my eyes after many years of study told me exactly the opposite thesis. For many years I followed a track. I was convinced that, on the contrary of which I had just affirmed, the couples with the 90-degree sun position were the most numerous, followed by the others with a respective sun at 180 degrees and 0 degrees. The other couples, those at 60 degrees and 120 degrees according to the tradition, were, in my opinion, a lot less numerous. Once, many years ago, during an international congress, I discussed this with my friend Lisa Morpurgo, and she also declared that she was convinced of the same reality. However, it was exactly my colleague of Cremona to suggest that I develop a statistical research on this argument. And so I did, together with Luigi Miele, who was at my side in all the important researches conducted till now. This work was published in my quarterly magazine Ricerca, 1905, January 1991, and it referred to the analysis of 2,116 couples for a total of 4,232 subjects obtained from the file Paris 12 Raw, kindly provided for us, personally, by the great Michel Gauquelin, who we thank again, together with his ex-wife Françoise Gauquelin, to whom we owe other very precious databases that we utilize successively. I will not give you the details on the technical data of that research, but I will report you only the conclusions from which it resulted, that the couples formed by subjects with the Sun in reciprocal square or opposition were certainly in a greater number than the ones with the luminaries in every astrological angle of trine or sextile. Later, in the number 12 of winter 1993 of the magazine In English Correlation, a study very similar to ours was published, conducted by the colleague Jan Ruiz on 2,824 marriages, also selected from Gauquelin's data. And here is the shocking results, exactly identical to the one we obtained 2 years earlier, the aspects of 90 degrees and 180 degrees between the Sun and the Sun of the spouses, even if they were not statistically significant, were, however, far more numerous than the sextiles and trines. At this point, several months ago, when I was thinking about writing a book on this subject, I told myself that I should have not chosen the way to rest on my laurels, but I decided to roll up my sleeves and to proceed to a new test about this work hypothesis. And so, Luigi Miele and I proceeded to a new statistical research, and with the help of a precious informatic engineer, we sifted a new, very numerous data sample. The precise technical details of this study were presented by me at the following Astrological Congress on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th June in Vico Equense, near Sorrento, Italy. Now, instead, I will refer only to the final and essential data of this study. We started once again from Gauquelin's data samples, and exactly from the files Lille Raw, Paris 12 Raw, Paris 13 Raw, Paris 14B Raw, Paris 14P Raw, and Paris 15 Raw, that collected in total 68,001 subjects relative to 25,391 families, of which, however, only 15,325 were formed by the father and the mother, and then only on these we worked, testing a final sample so selected of 30,650 subjects. The research's results confirmed both the last two researches, ours published in 1991 and the Dutch one published in 1993. The couples that had the Sun in square or in opposition were more numerous than the ones with the Sun in trine or sextile. Well, it could be a little ring of the truth's chain, but it is a ring quite certain that, if it will be confirmed successively, can fix a rule that I have already utilized for many years. The one that I named under the label of the so-called destiny signs, or those 4 signs that form a cross with our own solar sign, and that, from the results that you have just learned, can justify the argument according to which the most durable couples are the ones that belong to our zodiacal sign, to the one opposite and to the two in an angle of 90 degrees. To correct the false information already divulgated so much in the past, that would be the signs in trine or in sextile to promise relationships the most durable in time. It seems to me the best contribute that astrology can offer to the third millennium's couples to help them find a way with major successful chances. Bibliography o Ciro Discepolo, Guida all'Astrologia, the new guide to astrology 2011, available on www.amazon.com. Armenia Publisher, Milano 1979, pages 610, e-edition, o Ciro Discepolo and il gruppo di lavoro di Napoli, ricerche varie, several researches, quarterly magazine, ricerca 90, number 0, Napoli 1990, Paghi, 112 o Ciro Discepolo, and Luigi Miele, terza indagine sulle coppie, the third research on the couples, quarterly magazine, ricerca 90, number 5, Napoli 1991, pages 128, o Ciro Discepolo and Francesco Maggiore, introduzione alla Synastria, Introduction to Synastry, Blue Diamond Publisher, Milano 1996, pagine 104, o Ciro Discepolo, Nuovo dizionario di astrologia, The New Astrology Dictionary, Armenia Publisher, Milano 1996, pages 394, o Ciro Discepolo and Luigi Miele, quarta indagine sulle coppie, The Fourth Research on the Couples, Quarterly Magazine, ricerca 90, number 43, Napoli, July 2000, pages 128, o Michel and Françoise Gauquelin, Hereditary Experiment, Laboratoire d'études des relations entre rythmes cosmiques et psychophysiologiques, Paris 1970, page 126, o Carl Gustav Jung, La Synchronicità, The Synchronicity, Biblioteca Boringhieri, Torino 1983, pagine 124, o Verena Cast, La Coppia, The Couple, Red Publisher, Como 1991, pagine 176, o Desmond Morris, La scimmia nuda, The Nude Monkey, Bompiani Publisher, Milano 1999, pagine 270, o Maria Rita Parsi, L'amore dannoso, The Damaging Love, Mondadori Publisher, Milano 1999, pages 188, o Willy Pasini, A che cosa serve la coppia? What is the couple for? Oscar Mondadori, Milano 1995, pagine 300, o Jan Ruiz, ricerca statistica sulle coppie, Statistical Research on the Couples, Semestral Correlation, Dalfsen, The Netherlands, 1993, Winter, pagine 72. Notice, Note 1. The present statistical work was addressed to the study of heterosexual couples, not for a prejudice, but because the sample given to us from Michel and Françoise Gauquelin was formed uniquely for married couples. If, in the future, we will even be able to have a great number of homosexual couples, then we will be very happy to study even this research segment. Note 2. The original software utilized for this statistical research, not for sale, was elaborated by Mario Maglietta, Luigi Miele, and Ciro Discepolo. Note 3. The complete study by a statistical point of view of the present research was published in the Italian quarterly magazine Ricerca 90. Note 4. I avail myself of this opportunity to clarify to my readers in English my personal position about statistics in astrology, and in particular my statistical researches. I have, in fact, to specify as follows. I don't consider astrology as a science or even an exact science. B. I think that astrology is closer to art than to science, as in the case of medicine. C. However, I am not against the use of statistics in astrology, and personally I have spent a great part of my life researching following this method. D. Considering together years of work, costs, and a very great commitment, I can honestly say that I have given to statistical researches in astrology a considerable part of my existence. Among all the researches that I have produced in my life, only one gave me an extraordinary positive result, in the sense of a statistically significant Z, relatively to a research of mine on astrological hereditariness that demonstrates, with a very, very high Z value, that children are born much more frequently than the average, with the ascendant corresponding to the solar sign of one of the parents. F. In all my books, I always wrote that I got only one significant result from my statistical researches. G. As you have read earlier, also in this astrological statistics, about 4,232 subject I have written, that I was not able to reach a statistical significant result. Haven't I? This book is the translation of an Italian book of mine, and some of my readers of not much intelligence have found out that this statistic research, like others, did not give me any good result in relation to the initial hypothesis. I'm sorry, but I'm obliged to repeat it again, writing it in bold. I have never obtained positive statistical research's results, except for the one on hereditariness. That said, I privilege in my astrological practice the value of the experience over that of statistics, since the latter, which may have been set erroneously, will lead us to wrong results. Oh, I'd also like to add that in every statistical research of mine, almost of them performed with Luigi Miele, I've always had the statistical settings, general settings, sample collecting, initial hypothesis, mathematical calculations and results, checked by professional statistical experts, almost always university professors of statistics. I did this contrary to some of my adversaries, who, sometimes by denigrating my work, self-certified their own critiques, although they did not have any qualification either as astrologers or as statistical experts. M. However, a seed value which is almost significant is nonetheless telling in relation to our research.